Public Finance Corporation, right? Good evening, we're back. This is the regular meeting of the Morro Bay City Council, Tuesday, January 14th, 2020. We are in the Veterans Hall. It is 6:22 p.m. We're at 209 Surf Street in Morro Bay. We have a quorum of council members present. For your information, for our audience in TV land, we had a meeting of the Morro Bay Public Finance Corporation that was just completed and are now moving into the City Council meeting. With that, I have established a quorum, and I'll ask for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And Councilmember Heller, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And do we have a closed session report, Mr. City Attorney?
No reportable action, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That'll bring us to mayor and council member reports. Who'd like to start us off this evening? Looking left, looking right. Councilmember Davis, thank you.
Yes, and thank you all for coming tonight. And tonight I want to recognize one of our special Morro Bay citizens, Captain Jeremiah O'Brien. Jeremiah has fished for more than 30 years in just about all of the West Coast fisheries and is one of the most widely recognized representatives of fishing in the state. He's currently vice president and was formerly president of the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization, and he has served on our Harbor Advisory Board for many years. Jeremiah was part of the group that worked with Castle Wind to form an agreement to reimburse Morro Bay fishermen for impacts to the fishing grounds by the proposed wind farm. And Jeremiah is the face of Morro Bay fishing. He is the person everyone goes to when fishing, harbor, and marine issues need attention. He is truly one of Morro Bay's living treasures, and I thank Jeremiah for the many ways he's contributed to our community. No. I have a prop, but I don't want to cover my face for the camera. The City of Morro Bay has once again received an award as a bicycle-friendly community from the League of American Bicyclists. This is a renewal of our award 4 years ago, and it recognizes the city's strong commitment to bicycling. We're very proud of this accomplishment. I want to thank our planning and our public works staffs for their strong support and efforts to create an environment that supports bicycling. And thanks to Rob Livick for filling out the very lengthy applications. So you can see these signs posted around town that commemorate that we are a bicycle-friendly community. And one last item, I will hold office hours this coming Saturday at Sun and Buns from 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock. So please feel free to come and see me and talk to me about anything.
Great, thank you. Great recognition. And those will be, when will those be going up? The signs?
We have signs already posted from our award 4 years ago, and we can certainly put up additional signs in appropriate places.
Yes, we have 4 additional signs that will be posted at probably over the next 4 to 8 weeks as our maintenance crew has time in their duties, and if they're at that location anyway, we'll have them post the signs.
Great, thanks, Rob.
Thanks. Councilmember Addis.
We just want to invite the public and those on TV to the Women's March on Saturday, 10 a.m. at Mitchell Park. We'd love to see everyone out there. There's a huge call to action alley that we'll have with probably 20 to 30 nonprofits that will be in attendance, some fantastic speakers, as well as Diane Sousa, our poet, who's been there for a number of years. So we hope to see you at 10 a.m. at Mitchell Park this Saturday.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember McPherson.
Yes. Well, I had planned to make a very extensive announcement about the upcoming 24th Annual Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival, which is very near and dear to my heart. I volunteered for 16 years and served 6 years as its chair. But I am going to yield my time to my friend Chris, who has an ambassador, and eventually will talk to us about it during public comments. So thank you, Chris, for coming and bringing your friend. It's this Saturday through Monday, by the way, and the public, there are events for the public. There is registration 6 a.m. Friday morning, in case he forgets to mention that.
Thank you. Councilmember Hiller.
One of the duties I have as a council member is to serve on the County Board Integrated Waste Management Authority, which deals with all of our trash and where it goes and how it's processed and what it costs. And I'm embarrassed to say I really love this stuff. I've really gotten into trash. And not to be outdone by Councilmember Davis, I also have a prop.
Uh-oh, is it garbage?
This is the canister that my wife and I finally agreed on putting on our kitchen counter where we put all of our organic waste. Do not put your organic waste down the garbage disposal. That's like yesterday. Today, it needs to go into your green can and sent to the San Luis Obispo anaerobic digester, which converts it to compost and/or electricity. It took my wife and I a long time to agree on a container, and if those of you who got the white plastic one with the green lid, not going to happen. Never be in our kitchen. This has done the trick. Please get one and use it. Thank you.
What does it say? I'm just curious.
That's private.
Oh, that's private. Okay. There's some writing you'll have to see later, folks. It's private.
Home Goods, $8.99.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. I have no announcements, but I wanted to wish everybody a Happy New Year. Hopefully you had a very peaceful holiday season, and thanks to our staff who had some time off, I think, to rest and get some respite. We appreciate all that you did last year and are looking forward to this year. And with that, we'll continue on. Mr. City Manager, I believe you have a report for us today.
We have one announcement from our planning director, Scott Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Wanted to inform the council that you recall back in October we had our kind of housing presentation to you, and one of the things that I indicated that we'd be doing would be submitting a grant application to the Department of Housing and Community Development for $160,000. Happy to announce that we received the award of that $160,000 about a week and a half ago. So good news for us, and we'll be working, moving forward with HCD to formalize the grant agreement, and then to start work on putting together some housing policies, that look at by right housing and some development and design guidelines for those types of things, and maybe increasing densities in certain areas, maybe looking at tiny home policies, stuff like that. So good news for us. I mean, it was pretty exciting that we were able to get it. And we're going to put it to good use. So I just wanted to let the council know about that and the public. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great work. With that, I'll open up public comment. This is a public comment period for items on the agenda for which you cannot stay, and or other items you'd like to discuss in general. I do have a couple of slips, and I'll start with those. Chris Cameron. Oh, yeah. That's kind of cool. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor and Chair people. I'm Chris Cameron from the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival. I'm here with my support animal. This is Hackles. the Harris hawk. Harris's hawk is a desert hawk, and he's here, and he's going to be giving presentations for the first time. We have falconry-based presentations at the Morro Bay Bird Festival. It's an experiment. We'll see how it goes and see how people are interested in it. And so I want to thank you for your support for years and years. In fact, 24 years of support for the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival, both in facilities and some assistance in marketing. And we appreciate that. This year there will be 800 people involved in the Morro Bay Bird Festival for 150 field trips and workshops. That's a lot of organization to make happen. And people are coming from several states and, in fact, out of the country just to come to this festival. Just I was looking at one today, someone from Alaska and someone from New York are coming for this festival just to go on a couple of our bird trips. All of you as council people and staff are welcome to come to both the Friday reception. There's a bazaar reception at the community center. And on Saturday and Sunday, we have keynote speakers, and we've outgrown anything in Morro Bay, so this will be held at the Cuesta College Performing Arts Center. And you are welcome to come to those presentations by our keynote speakers. And I just wanted to show, this is the t-shirt. Every year we have a t-shirt. So the camera, here's the t-shirt, Little Green Heron for the 24th Annual Bird Festival. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Why don't you give us the Bird Festival website in case people want to look at the programs and they may want to come to some of them?
That's a good question. I don't know what the website is right away.
MorroBayBirdFestival.org.
Perfect. There you go.
There you go.
Pre-registration is already done, so the only thing that's left is some walk-ins on Friday, and there are still a few good trips if you'd like to be involved in a trip on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or Monday. Thank you.
Chris, thank you. I was there last year at your opening and a couple sessions. Great group, and glad you're growing and part of Morro Bay. And I love your shirt, but
Yeah,
I
it's
love
nice.
your falcon.
Yeah.
Really?
This is a hawk, not a falcon.
Well, I love your falcon
Close
too.
enough.
I'm talking
do
about your
have-
car.
Okay.
Yeah.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay, great. Next up
Thank
for
you.
public comment, Dr. Robert Swain. Dr. Bob, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Robert Swain, Dr. Swain, and I live in Morro Bay. And I'd like to thank the council, mayor, city staff, all you millions out there in TV land. And I'd like to wish everybody a happy and healthy new year. Speaking of health, CDC said this year is going to be the biggest flu season ever. So they gave a couple of recommendations on what to do, and one of them is wash your hands often, but there's a right way and a wrong way. So I'm here to show you the right way. And the right way is, before you ever put soap or water on your hands, you rub them together, tops and bottoms. That way it breaks all the bacteria and everything loose. So once you put it in the soap, it comes right off. Otherwise, you're missing a lot of it. So 15 to 20 seconds, rub your hands together, and it makes it better. Hopefully you don't get sick. So that's the right way to do it. So speaking of the right way, another right way I have is the Morro Bay Maritime Museum is going to have I have a poster up here, is going to have a speech. July, I always say July. I want the year to be over with. January 30th, which is a Thursday. And it starts at 6:30, and it's going to be on a captain who's done one of the big Maersk cargo ships for, 20-some years, and he's got a lot of stories on his trials and tribulations going through pirate land down there off the Cape of Africa. And his friend right now is over in they take turns. There's 72 days on, 72 days off. So his friend is over there, and they had to be escorted with cruisers on each side of him down through the Mideast. And they had to turn around because it got too crazy. So, it's not an easy job. And his name is Evan Barbas. He's a captain. And great stories. So tickets can be purchased at the museum. Our hours there are Thursdays through Mondays from 10 to 3, closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Well, I didn't mention price. So let's say price is $10. Very reasonable, cash only. And for more information, you can contact us at info@morrobaymaritimemuseum.org. So we hope to see you there. And the time, I think I said it, 6:30? Did I say AM or PM? I want to make sure.
You said
awake.
PM.
It's PM, not AM. Okay. And also, I want to just say I'm in favor of voting in C1 later today for you guys. And I want to thank the council and the city staff for doing such a great job keeping our city afloat and progress we're making. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Michael Wolfe, who is here for Business Spot. Michael, you thought I forgot you, but that green avocado shirt kind of gave you away. Good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, good to
This
see
is our
you.
business spot for the evening, representing the Avocado Shack, right?
Yes, thank you very much.
Good to have you.
Good to see you. Good evening. My name is Michael Wolfe, and thank you for inviting me to speak to you tonight. I'm here to introduce my new business, the Avocado Shack here in Morro Bay, and that's 2790 North Main, right by Chapala Grill. I am a Central Coast native. I grew up in Los Osos. I graduated Morro Bay High School, 1984. I lived and raised my 3 children in Cambria for the last 28 years. That's where I know John from. For the first time, I am a proud resident of Morro Bay, first time in my life, and I'm much enjoying it. Big warm welcome. I really feel at home here. I have 35 years experience in produce retail. I first started with Williams Brothers, 1983, 490 Quintana. When Vaughn's acquired Williams Brothers, I stayed on for another 13 years. After that, I worked 3 years at Spencer's after the strike. And then I moved to work for the Cookie Crock for 12 years in that same location at 490 Quintana. So a lot of years in that building, a lot of years of building relationships with y'all, and it's been great. I have a passion for providing fresh produce to my customers. I take that seriously, and it's just a real great feeling of satisfaction to do that for my friends and my neighbors at fair prices, and just keep people healthy. You know, it's a good feeling. When I go home at the end of the night, I think I did something good. And our mission at the Avocado Shack is connecting our local farmers and with our neighbors. I think of it as a 7-day-a-week farmers market. You know, so many people, sometimes it's not convenient to make a farmers market. You know, people working in San Luis, they really don't have a chance to shop here in Morro Bay. And this has afforded them the opportunity to do that. I think it's going to bring money back into this community that's leaving. And it's also, I'll be able to provide local jobs and hire local kids and anyone else for that matter that's good with customer service. And we also provide just produce at fair prices, just fair, no gouging. You know, keep the overhead low. It's a real simple business model, real straightforward. I've done farmers market in Cambria for the last several years for the McCall farm. I ran that farm for a few years, so I've been a farmer too. I raised 3 acres of tomatoes this year. So I've run the tractor, I've done the drip lines, all that sort of thing, and it's really fun to complete all that together. So I look forward to participating in the Avocado Margarita Festival again this year, as I have in the past. I look forward to being an integral part of the Morro Bay community. And just want to say thank you, and thank you for the city clerks that helped me start my business. I've never started a business before. It just happened quick, it was efficient, everybody had real positive attitudes, and for somebody that's a complete novice to this, and I really appreciate that. The city's obviously is just helpful in every way. So thank you, and I'll see you guys around.
Do you have a website? Do you want to?
I do. AvocadoShack.net.
AvocadoShack.net?
.net, yes.
Okay, and hours of operation?
We are Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, and on the weekends, 9 to 3, Saturday and Sunday. And we will have expanding hours as we grow.
2790 North Main?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Good to see you again, my friend.
Thank you. Good to see you.
All right.
May I say
You may.
that Mike has been nonstop business since the day he opened. People are lined up. I don't think you have ever had a moment alone since you opened your doors. It's a fabulous shop. He has a wide variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, and it is the place to go to.
I appreciate that. And we have organics coming in February, so we're just going to keep growing.
Thanks, Michael. Good to see you. All right, next up for general public comment is Mimi Goldberg. Mimi, welcome.
Hi, good evening, City Council and everybody. My name's Mimi Goldberg, and I'm here representing myself and my dog, Bruno Goldberg. December 10th, I spoke to you regarding the Ninth Circuit struck down the laws against homeless camping, and the U.S. Supreme Court let that stand, which limits enforcement options, finding it to be cruel and unusual punishment to prosecute people for sleeping on the street if insufficient shelter isn't available. Matt Levin yesterday published, Governor Newsom has adopted a homeless coalition, which includes Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg and LA County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas. And they want to do a legally enforceable mandate. Newsom said he would lean in the direction speedily deploying a legal obligation to supply sufficient services and housing. And a number of cities and counties have volunteered to do demonstration projects over the next several months, not the next few years. This could bring litigation as a tool. On Friday, Newsom proposed more than $1 billion in new state funds to fight homeless, calling it an issue that defines our times in California. Any policy that promotes locking up people or punishing people for being homeless, those policies have been very ineffective in the past. Morro Bay needs to act on homeless or face lawsuits. I hope you don't want to get punished for not helping or reducing homelessness. California voters in November will be able to vote on that, the legally enforceable mandate. Newsom said he wants to test whether or how a smaller number of cities and counties they can alleviate homelessness in the coming months. 6 days ago, Newsom also wants to create a large fund building housing on state land. Governor has funds for like tents, little houses, all kinds of funding, but Morro Bay has to do the footwork. It's winter and it's cold, and if we please help the homeless in Morro Bay. There are incentives for Morro Bay, and the governor has them. I'm a returning student. I'm enrolled back at Cuesta College, and I'll be getting my degree, and I'd really like to see something done soon regarding a warming center or something for the homeless, okay? Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Mimi. That's the last speaker slip I have for general public comment. General public comment is still open. Any member of the public wishing to come forward for items on the agenda for which you can't stay or other items, please do so now. Welcome, Betty.
Good evening. I just want to say about the avocado man that he raised the best tomatoes when he was working at Cookie Crock. They were just really delicious, so I'm glad he's here back full-time. I want to register a complaint that you held a corporation meeting at the same time that you advertised that the city council was meeting. That's really confusing to the public to say we're having the corporation meeting at 5:30, we're having city council at 5:30. When I was walking in at 5:30, two people had just come in and had just left because they had come for public comment. They're taking the time to create their comments, to get dressed up, give their time at 5:30, came to find out it was the corporation. They turned around and went home. So you won't hear their comments, whatever they were. So I hope that in the future, if you're going to do these meetings back to back, you'll give clear times of when each meeting begins. Regarding the previous meeting, I'd like to clarify that when it was stated during the corporation meeting that the city had to form the corporation, I would like to remind the council or let the public know that we knew when you formed that you had a choice. You could either go to the people and ask for to go into debt, or you could form the corporation that would acquire the debt. So to say that you had to have the corporation isn't exactly true. You made a choice to do that as opposed to the other. So certainly you needed some kind of means to do that, but that wasn't your only option. And I think maybe that addresses Councilmember Heller's question about, people's concern about not having input to the corporation. And then my last public comment is nice to see the bicycle signs, and I am a user of the bicycle paths, either with bicycle or pedestrian, and I hope that this means that you'll be throwing some money at our bicycle paths, particularly those on the west side of the highway that run along PG&E and that run along Cloisters and through Cloisters, because they are starting to crack. They are needing some upkeep if you're going to have them in any kind of shape that you want to advertise tourists to use, that you can't just build them and neglect them. You need to do some upkeep. Thanks.
Thank you. Public comment is still open for items either on the agenda for which you can't stay or other items. Welcome.
I put a slip in, but I can't stay. My name is Tracy Thies. I'm from Atascadero. I work for the County Office of Education. I represent the tobacco use prevention education grants for all of the districts in the county. I just wanted to bring up some data for you. The 2018 Healthy Kids Survey showed that 36% of the 11th graders at Morro Bay High School had used one or more times in their lifetime an electronic cigarette. They also show that 23% of those 11th graders also reported using the electronic cigarette within the last 30 days of that survey period during February of 2018. This next month, we are also doing the California Healthy Kids Survey, so we are anticipating this data will be going up a lot higher. They also have added the word vaping into the questions so that that term, which is more familiar to students, is more able for them to respond to the question and make sense of it. So we do hope that you are able to pass the ordinance regarding your prohibiting the sale of the vaping products in the city, and helping with the secondhand smoke ordinance in the multi-unit housing area. We also hope that a flavor ban might be put into place like Santa Maria has done recently. We are seeing that the students are using flavored products, and those resemble candy, and we do know that the students are becoming addicted to those because it does seem so much like a sweet treat. And we hope that you think about that in the future of your bans that you do look at. Since we look at the data, that's what's starting them, and that's where the addiction is starting at the young age, and we do need to see that banned from our area. The local kids have been telling me that they are in some focus groups. They've told me that they get it from the local retailers versus online. So we do want to make sure that it's not available. They're also getting rewarded for going to those retailers by having like a BOGO, buy one, get one free, or buy 5, get another pod. So I hope that you do take that into perspective, that they're not just buying it online, they're getting it locally. So thank you.
Thank you. General public comment is still open for items on the agenda for which you can't stay or other items. Barry, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Barry Brannon, Morro Bay. Over the last 6-7 months, I've come to this podium and I've asked the question, when are we going to start repairing the pipes that are outlined in your One Water project? I know they're specifically laid into, they're all outlined what you have to do. And I noticed in the city manager's report, in it was the wastewater treatment plant, and they talked about the flows through the plant during the month of November. And if you look, it was had a great spike. We had a nice big rainfall. The infiltration is filling the plant, causing the plant to have to work harder than it needs to, and the infiltration needs to be addressed. I know you know the problem. I know your staff knows the problem, and I wondered if you could give us an update on possibly when we might see a RFP to do the work, and perhaps do it, because you have the money. You've got a 218 to do the money. We're not seeing any work in the streets, and we think it's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. General public comment is still open for items either on the agenda for which you can't stay or other items. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. I'm Cynthia Hawley, and I have a few questions about the project design of the WRF. First of all, I'm not an engineer, but I've been told that the engineering plans, the 60% engineering plans, show the water line from the recycling plant going directly into the distribution line for the city's water, instead of going to the well fields for injection. And I'd like somebody to talk about that. Also, I'd like the capacity of the plant to be clarified, because in the drawings and the text in the Exhibit B for the contract with the design builder, Black & Veatch, that contract that the city contracted to build, shows that the plant has two headworks, both of which have the capacity to process 8.14 million gallons a day. Now that has been removed from the 60%. I can't tell if it's still in the drawings, but mention of it has been expunged from the 60% designs. That there are two headworks, and both of which can produce 8.14 million gallons of water a day. And also the permit that the Coastal Commission issued is for a 1 million gallon a day plant. So I would like someone to explain why the water line looks like it's going directly in, why the recycled water line looks like it's going directly into the distribution line, and to explain whether or not the two headworks, both with the capacity to produce 8.14 million gallons a day, is still part of the project or not. Thank you.
Thank you. General public comment is still open for items on the agenda for which you can't stay or anything else. Seeing none and having no, oh, I see a late arriver. Welcome.
My name is Melanie Williams-Mahan. About a week ago, I looked out at the dunes and saw a man walking on top of the dunes. He saw me and ducked down. I called 911 and State Parks came out. He searched the area and found a significant encampment between the beach and the walkway in the cloisters. We called, the State Parks officer told us he has seen this area grow unmanageable. The homeless have started several fires in the dunes, and so far we've been lucky. We spotted a fire 2 years ago, called the fire department, and they put it out successfully, thank you. An encampment had started that fire. Recently, we hired an arborist to come out and figure out what was going on with our willows. Our willows are dying. They've got a thing called witch's broom on them, and it looks like Spanish moss, but it's not. And what it does is it attaches to the willows, and it just chokes them out. It's very aggressive. And one of the things, we asked him why, and I also live along that drainage ditch that between the cloisters and the high school. And the willows that's where the willows are, and that has become stagnant. So what's happening is there's so many toxins and stuff down there that they're killing the willows. And we talked to the high school. We also have a huge mosquito problem. The reason the willows are dying is because the flow has stopped. And if you look at the drainage ditch up there, it's got weeds coming out of it because it's not been cleared in a long time. And it's just dark water, and it's breeding mosquitoes like crazy. We've had a lot of problems with mosquitoes in the cloisters in the last, I don't know, couple of years really, but it's really ramped up this last summer. And one of the things we were concerned about, and the reason we call the arborist too, is with the fires in the dunes, if anything touches those willows, everything goes up. And that means you've got a whole drainage ditch where houses back right up to it, and they're going to catch on fire. So this thing needs to be managed. They need to be cleared out. They need to be, he said they're not going to get any better. They're just going to die, and he said they'll probably be gone within 2 years. So we're concerned with the encampments out in the dunes starting fires, and then we have the perfect fuel right next to our homes. So I hope we can get something done with that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. General public comment is still open for items on the agenda for which you can't stay or other items in general. Surveying the audience, hearing no footprints, I will close public comment, bring it back to council. Let me start with a couple of questions. First of all, let's see. If Councilmember McPherson, could you comment on Ms. Goldberg's comments regarding homeless and Morro
Yes.
Station and what's going on?
Yes, I could. And I noticed that she's left, but the city did apply last year for a grant that was part of the governor's funding for homeless to renovate the Vets Hall to use as a temporary warming shelter. We did not get approval of that grant, but more monies have been available, or will be made available in the coming year, and we intend to reapply, and it looks at this point like our chances have improved in that regard. So we are trying to do something about it, and we will continue to do something about it.
Thank you. Mr. Leivik, Mr. Brannon's question about the CIP projects for pipes and what's going on, an update, please?
Sure. We have 2 RFPs out right now, one for collection system improvements that were identified in the One Water Plan for final design, tentatively scheduled to have that design work by the successful consultant completed by the end of this fiscal year, and then we would go out to bid for construction. And then we have our water projects also with another RFP for the replacement of the nutmeg tank, improvements to that pressure zone there, Elena booster, elimination of the Vashon booster station. That is out for also engineering design work. We expect to receive proposals the first week in February, and should they be of above the threshold that the city manager can authorize those, we'd be bringing those to council expediently after that. So that's where they stand. I can also answer Ms. Holly's questions regarding the line work on the 60% plans. It showed to some folks, it appeared that the reclaimed water line was plumbed directly into the distribution system. It's a line work, I won't say error, but the reclaimed water line terminated at about where the distribution system is because the injection wells have not been designed yet. Probably would have clarified things with a note there clarifying that that will continue on and tie into the injection well system. The treatment plant will have a design capacity of 1.88 MGD peak average daily flow. Peak wet weather flow is upwards of 8 MGD that have to be accommodated at the treatment plant. We don't have options to not bring that those high peak flows through the wastewater treatment plant. So we need the headworks to be able to handle that flow that comes in from the city into the treatment plant. So we assume that one screening mechanism at the headworks will be down, and the other one will accommodate those peak flows, bringing it through the headworks. So that is
That's within the purview of the coastal development permit?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
The 54th Street drainage channel, as Ms. Mahan talked about, that is on San Luis Coastal Unified School District property, basically on the high school lot. Our maintenance staff coordinates with them on the maintaining that. They have, as we have seen financial constraints, the school district has seen financial constraints, and they're working on trying to get that cleaned up. So we'll continue to work with the school district the best we can to coordinate that work, but it is on their property and it is their responsibility to maintain.
Okay. And Chief Cox, any comments regarding the encampment that was referred to by Ms. Mahan? Any issues that you've been aware of or patrolling, and or Chief Knuckles with regard to fire issues? Or
Not on the ones related to state property.
Okay, thank you. Chief Knuckles, any issues?
To my knowledge, we've had 3 fires this last year from homeless encampments, 2 in the state park, and 1 in the Cloisters area.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Ms. Winholtz, thank you. I agree with you. It was confusing on the Morro Bay Corporation meeting versus the City Council meeting, and we'll try to rectify that. We will rectify that the next time those meetings occur to separate those and make it clear so that we can receive adequate public comment. With that, I'll move to item A on the agenda, consent. I'll open up public comment for consent agenda items, A1 through A7. I do have speaker slips. I'm going to start with those. Tracy Theus, I think she already was here and made comment. Benan Akari. Benan, welcome.
Good evening. I'm here to speak about the tobacco ban. Well, my time just started. Well, I think we should just postpone it because the FDA came up with something. A lot of things changed from the last meeting. We thought the FDA, they never gonna come up with something, but they did. They came up with something and they legalized some stuff, they banned some stuff. And I think they have more knowledge. I think they have the right people to look at it, and we should go with what they have. We shouldn't let them do the work for us. When they ban something else, we go with it. If they legalize it, we should legalize it. Last time, Mr. Davis asked you why we ban it if it is legal and regulated. You say it's legal but not regulated. So now it is coming to be regulated. So I don't think you should ban it. I think you should just postpone it, look more, get more information, then we could just let the FDA do the work. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up for public comment regarding the consent agenda is Inger Apanantis, and I'm sorry if I messed that up. Inger, help me out again when you get up here.
It's easy, it's appendicitis.
There you go, just like appendicitis. Okay.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Inger Apanantis. I'm the program manager for tobacco control at the County of San Luis Obispo Public Health Department. As Mr. Akari mentioned, there's been a lot of movement around policy and e-cigarettes and vaping in the past month. And so I wanted to do a brief overview of what's kind of happening at the federal level, the state level, and even locally. So hot off the press, the County Board of Supervisors today approved 4-0 to ban the sale of e-cigarettes in the unincorporated areas of the county, including Los Osos, Cambria, Cayucas, and so forth. As was mentioned at the beginning of January, the FDA came out with guidance on banning the sale of e-cigarette pods, some flavored e-cigarette pods. And when that came out, I knew it was going to generate a lot of commotion, so I put together a visual aid. I'm not sure if a copy got distributed to the council, but I wanted to show how that kind of aligns with what we're seeing among the other California cities. On the very left-hand side, you have the most restrictive policies that have been pursued by cities such as Beverly Hills, and I believe Manhattan Beach is also going to be looking at a total ban on all tobacco products in this upcoming year. Next down, we have San Francisco's comprehensive ban of all flavored tobacco products and e-cigarette products, including online sales. The vast majority of cities in the state have pursued this third option, which is a ban on the sale of flavored tobacco. Locally, we see Santa Maria pursuing this option, as well as Santa Barbara County and the city of Santa Barbara. And now, earlier this month, there was a Senate bill introduced, 793, that's going to be that's proposing a ban on the sale of flavored tobacco as well. This is the second year such a ban is being proposed at the state level. As we move on down, we're looking at the ban on the sale of e-cigarettes, which Arroyo Grande passed last year. The County of San Luis Obispo has just passed today, and where your current regulation kind of falls under. And then moving on further down, you have weaker regulations that have exemptions for certain tobacco retailers or certain products, such as the mint and menthol products, which often get exempted from some of these policies. And that's where you see the proposal that was put out by the FDA earlier this month. So a ban on the sale of flavored e-cigarette pods. It's a very limited ban. I have another visual aid that kind of shows what that would look like. So the pod-based systems there are closed systems. You buy the pod and you stick it in the cartridge. Again, it makes up a very small class of products, but that's going to include, for example, Juul, which is one of the most popular products on the market. I did want to make a note about mint and menthol. According to the national data, thank you.
Sorry, your time's up. Thank you. Appreciate that presentation.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Next up for public comment is Dr. Bob Campbell. Bob, welcome.
Yes, thank you, John. I grew up in a small town like this, and I'm really enjoying the feeling of community that you have here tonight. It's quite noticeable if you don't live in an environment like this, so you should be pleased. Good evening, Mayor Heading and council members. I'm Robert Campbell. I'm a retired physician with nearly 40 years of clinical practice, and I'm currently a member of the County Health Commission. I'm here to discuss item A5, the e-cigarette ban, which, as I understand it, the ban on flavored tobacco products has been completely removed from the proposal. The proposal before you today is a commendable beginning, but it's quite incomplete. At issue is the creation of a new generation of nicotine addicts with the very real risks of permanent injury to growing brains, transitions to cigarettes, on and on and on. We can't let our youth be the guinea pigs in this massive experiment. I understand that sale of all vaping devices and products will be prohibited, but sale of all flavored tobacco products will be allowed. I urge you to reinstate the ban on flavored products. Flavors are the hook that bring kids to this lifetime habit. Big Tobacco is counting on it. A flavor ban must include all products, not just vape products. Youth deprived of their vaping flavors will likely just switch to menthol cigarettes. It's worth noting that menthol cigarettes account for 35% of all cigarette sales in the U.S. Prohibiting sale of delivery devices while allowing sale of the dangerous drug defies logic. It is really an empty gesture. Tobacco promoters cite e-cigarettes as a smoking cessation device, but this is a relatively hollow promise. The few adults who are able to quit smoking by vaping nicotine will be greatly outnumbered by the kids who transition from vaping to regular smoking habit. Given the enormous impact on the tobacco industry, we can predict massive lobbying in Washington to create restrictions. That's why local communities have to take action. We are the adults, and we must be unambiguous in defending our children from these purveyors of addiction. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Public comment is still open for the consent agenda. Any members of the public wishing to come forward, please do so now. Welcome, Betty.
I'm going to address item A4 that has to do with your appointments. I sent you an email earlier and hope you've had a chance to do some consideration. You know, but for the public's benefit, you make appointments to the county and then there are appointments within the city. So looking at the county appointments, Councilmember McPherson has only one assignment and Councilmember Addis doesn't have any. The latter may be due to Ms. Addis's running for higher office, yet she has a responsibility to us, the electorate, to represent us. And I feel that if these women aren't making themselves available, or are they being excluded? Because it's important to me as a female to have female representation on an equitable basis. In addition, just as a side note, I'm wondering why the SLO County Housing Trust Fund and the CMC Advisory Council aren't having council representation as we have traditionally done. The disproportionate distribution that the men are carrying the representation at the county, when we have 40% representation of women on the council, but only 10% at the county level because they're not being assigned to those county seats. Also, as you know, that each of the council member is supposed to be a liaison with one of your appointed standing committees. And again, Ms. Addis does not have that responsibility this year, and that's part of her duty to do that. And then if you look at the other committee assignments, where there are 12 committees, of which there are 24 assignments, because there's 2 of you on each of these committees, Mr. Heller, or Mr. Councilmember Heller, has only 1 appointment. Ms. Addis has only 3. Mr. Davis has the normal amount, 5, but Ms. McPherson and Mr. Heading, both of you have the extra amount of 8 and 7, which is dominating and not allowing the others to have equal representation. And that is why I said in my email that Morro Bay voters have not elected to have a strong mayor form of government. Rather, we have a 5-member city council, all of equal voting weight, and that the committee assignment should reflect that equity. So I'd ask you to pull item 4 and adjust the balance on both the county and the city assignments. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment is still open for items on consent agenda. Anybody wishing to come forward, please do so now. Welcome back.
I'm Melanie Ling again. I'm just going to give you a quote from The Atlantic, October 23rd, 2019. Politicians who ban flavors should brace for a surge in cigarette smoking and the use of questionable bootleg vaping products. I, too, think that, vaping is not the way to go, but I think vaping has helped a lot of people get off of cigarettes. And vaping also, the products that were in question were bootleg products. So if you ban this legally, you're going to have people either ordering online, which those could be bootleg products too, you don't know. Or you could have people just, get it off the street, which is the worst thing they can do. That was the problem. There was a vitamin E additive that was not done correctly in the bootleg products. And the FDA has never recommended against against vaping products. So I think this ban hurts the people that try to make a living selling this stuff. And I think if you start banning certain things, you're going to have to start banning other certain things. And when's it going to stop? So I think this ban is really going to affect the people that, have their businesses here. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment is still open for consent agenda items. Anybody wishing to come forward, please do so now. Surveying the audience, seeing significant lethargy and nobody coming forward, I will close public comment and bring it back to council. Anybody wish to pull any items?
I do. I wish to pull A4 and A5.
Okay, so A4 and A5. Anybody else? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve A1, 2, 3, and 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember McPherson to approve A1, A2, A3, A6, A7. Second by Councilmember Davis. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great. And Councilmember McPherson, A4.
Yes. I notified our city clerk earlier about the fact that there was an error in this, in the minutes here. I have been the representative to the Housing Services Oversight Committee, which is a county level board from the time I was appointed to the council, and I have been to all of the meetings for the last 3 years. So it was just an error that wasn't corrected. I had asked to be, we didn't catch it. That's what I have to say. So I would like to correct that error. If possible.
And that's for, I'm sorry, again, that's...
The HSOC, the Housing Services Oversight Council, which is the county level. And I have spoken with Mr. Davis, Councilmember Davis, who is listed as the member, and I'm listed as the alternate. But it was decided before the last meeting, last January, that I would be the person. So, and I have been the person. So I am continuing to fulfill my duties as I thought I had them.
So your recommendation is to change the HSOC committee representation to
Correct.
you as the member and Councilmember Davis as the alternate?
That is correct.
Okay. Any other comments?
And the other comments I wanted to make in response to Ms. Winholt's comments is that on all of the council subcommittees, when we have asked to, we ask for volunteers to serve on those committees. They're not necessarily appointed, and some of us are more willing to do a little bit more work or have greater interest. So I don't think there's any kind of a unfair balance in that. It really is up to us as individuals to volunteer for those committees. So otherwise, I'm ready to move that we approve item A4 with the change that I just suggested, which is for the HSOC.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember McPherson to approve consent item A4 with the change noted for HSOC representation, primary McPherson, secondary Davis. Second by Councilmember Davis, and I'll open it up for any input or discussion.
I just have a quick comment.
Sure.
I want to appreciate the comment about equal representation and just note that I think it's important to have working people on the council also, and that sometimes the schedules overlap. And so I want to appreciate the mayor for recognizing that and appreciate the public for your flexibility. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat.
It's not a red-legged frog, is it? No.
Not a red-legged frog. No.
Too easy. Yeah, I know. Thank you for that comment. Any other comments? Yeah. Yes, Councilmember Heller.
So regarding A4,
yes.
The process, for those of you who don't know, this is the second year for me. And invariably, the mayor sits down with me or he calls me and says, hey, Jeff, what about this? Would you like this assignment? Would you like that assignment? And generally, it all sounds great to me. And I've got to say I apologize to the mayor because every year when I see the printed list, I have a problem with it. And it's no fault of yours. You make every effort to be equitable and assign assignments to people. That said, I do agree with Betty Winholtz's comments. In general, it does seem like it's kind of a John and Marla show, to be honest, in terms of the assignments. You guys are carrying the heavy water, which is great, but I used to be on the, and I sent this email to you, Mr. Mayor, I was on the power plant. I was linked with you on the power plant, not really a committee, but with that issue. And I would like to either remain on that or I would like to be on the WRF JPA. When you look at the numbers in Ms. Winholtz's email, they are kind of stark, and I'd like to see a more equitable distribution.
Thank you, and thank you for the comment. Per your comment, we did have the discussion, and the discussion specifically involved you moving away from that committee, which you agreed to. It got agendized, and now you're changing your mind, and that's your purview, and I understand that. That's fine.
Thank you.
Let me just read. I don't agree with it, but it's fine for that to be your purview.
Thank you.
Let me read the policy. Annually, the mayor shall make appointments to the county or regional committees or boards. Those are appointments that I make as mayor. That doesn't include the council representation on subcommittees or council liaisons. I make recommendations. They get put on consent, and those are approved by council. And so let that be known that I do try to accommodate not only schedules for individuals that have conflicts, but also try to match work effort, availability, participation, and ability to attend with regard to other committee appointments. Most of the subcommittees, if not all, were approved by the City Council in general at one time or the other. So I stand by the recommendations that I've made. There is a motion on the table. We've heard some discussion. Unless there's other discussion, I will call the question with a roll call vote.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
No.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
And that brings us to item A5, pulled by Councilmember McPherson.
Yes, thank you. I would like to begin by asking Mr. Newmeyer just a couple of questions, just to clarify exactly what this ordinance contains. And as you know, I have voted against it consistently now twice, and would indeed vote against it again this time, but I am actually not going to make that as my motion. I want to just ask a couple of questions first. Could you just clarify exactly what items this ordinance would ban in Morro Bay? And I want you to talk to each one specifically.
Sure. So as Councilmember McPherson is alluding to, this ordinance has been before the council a few times, and there's been a number of changes, so I think it's good to clarify what actually is before the council now for an adoption or second reading. So the ordinance before the council now, which had its first reading at the prior council meeting in December, it would prohibit the commercial sale of all e-cigarettes, vaping products, vapes, completely. And you can see that on page 37 of the agenda packet or page 1 of agenda item A5. It would also implement regulations recommended by the American Lung Association, which would be that smoking is prohibited in multi-unit residences, which was generally apartments and condominiums. That does not include single-family homes or mobile homes. We'd create a tobacco retailer's license program aimed at providing the city with a mechanism to make sure that the tobacco retailers are licensed and to raise fees to provide for funding for enforcement mechanisms. Would prohibit the sale of tobacco products by retail establishments that contain a pharmacy. And then it also would put restrictions on the sales of cigars, meaning that single cigars that cost less than $5 would not be allowed for sale. Any number of cigars fewer than the number contained in the original manufacturer's packaging could not be sold outside of that packaging, and any package of cigars containing fewer than 5 cigars would not be allowed for sale. I'd like to point out that one of the issues that there was discussion on last time was whether or not to prohibit flavored tobacco sales, and so that was taken out. So there is not a prohibition on flavored tobacco sales. However, with the prohibition on all vaping products, obviously all flavored vape products are prohibited. They're just swept up in the prohibition on vaping products itself. And that is what is before the council now. There also has been a bit of discussion over the course of a few meetings on when the prohibition would take effect. As it stands right now, the retail prohibitions on vape products and then the further ones on limiting cigar sales, that would go into effect July 15th. The restrictions on secondhand smoke would go into effect March 15th.
And what did we do about menthol flavored vaping products? That's banned?
Vaping products are banned.
Totally, but all flavored cigarettes are not banned. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How about cannabis products?
Cannabis products are not prohibited.
Neither vaping nor tobacco?
If the cannabis...
flavored or anything?
Yeah, cannabis vaping products, if they're sold at one of the licensed retail establishments that the city's licensing, that's allowed.
Okay. So, and if there is a state law or federal law that is passed, that would take precedence over any local ordinance that we pass, is that correct?
Generally speaking, yes. If there is restrictions from the state or the federal government that are greater than local law, they most likely would apply. However, as it stands right now, these are greater than current law. The federal government has implemented what I would call a temporary ban on some vaping products, because that ban right now on flavored vape products is pending the FDA finally coming up with its results on whether or not it's safe to use them. So we could see that federal ban lifted once the FDA comes out with its report, or it might become permanent. And the federal temporary prohibition right now, till the FDA comes out with its report, is basically on fruit and candy flavored vaping products. It doesn't apply to tobacco flavored vaping products or menthol flavored vaping products.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And the reason I wanted to clarify that is that just in the last few days, there has been so much happening in this area that I think we should be aware of. First of all, there is currently federal and state legislation moving forward that will be in conflict with the ordinance that we have before us tonight. The editorial in the LA Times today said that at the state level, there is a bill to ban the sale of flavored tobacco and flavored vaping products, including menthol. It's moving forward, and the governor has said he would sign that bill. There was an article in USA Today that talked about the FDA bans on mint and fruit-flavored vaping products, but it exempts menthol and tobacco, and that would go in effect in 30 days. It concerns me that at our last meeting, we actually on the fly wrote an ordinance that we changed and then called a first reading. I think we did it much too fast. We didn't even understand all of the products that we were talking about. And we actually on the spot changed it, called it a first reading, and then put this on consent as a second reading. I think we moved much too quickly. I think we need to be very much aware of what is going on. I think we need to further study this before we move forward with the current ordinance. As I said, I was opposed to that ordinance. I could support parts of it. I can certainly support a ban on the flavored products that appeal to children. We absolutely, if we're designing an ordinance that is supposed to prevent the kids from getting these products, we need to focus on the products that the kids are getting. We need to find out how they're getting it in Morro Bay, if they're getting it from local dealers or online, or if they're having people buy it. But it's too soon to put a total ban on legal products for adults that hurts the city because we don't get the sales tax, hurts our local retailers, and they're going to buy the products elsewhere because they're legal. So let's focus on the problem. I believe that what we should do, and my motion is going to be that we table this and really work through what we need to accomplish with this ordinance, perhaps wait until we see what comes out at the federal level and the state level, and make sure we're consistent with those that other legislation. Otherwise, we're going to have to rewrite this ordinance and that's going to take time and money. We're going to have to pay our city attorney again to write a new ordinance that's consistent with state and federal laws that are changing as we speak. And I would again point out the editorial in the New York Times that I read the first time this issue came up, and that is that if everybody bans the sale for adults, all we're going to do is push it underground, and that's what's killing people. So it could hurt more than it can help. So I am making the motion that we table this tonight and bring it back at a future date when we have had more time to study it and actually decide what we want to do with this ordinance.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember McPherson to table A5, second by Councilmember Davis. I'll open with discussion. I absolutely disagree. The statistics presented to us by the agencies, including the County Health Department, the American Lung Association, and the Tobacco Coalition, speak greatly not only of the epidemic that's occurring nationally, but also the issues that are occurring right here in our own high school. I have zero tolerance for the addictive liability that is occurring with our young people, and feel a compelling held responsibility to protect them from this disastrous public health initiative. I don't think the federal government will move quickly enough, and if they do and it circumvents our ordinance, well, then we'll address it at that time. But I stick to the recommendation that we made, at least the council majority made at the last meeting, and I would not support the motion. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I think we need to have the courage to get this done. I think we're not doing it too quickly. I think we're doing it too late. There's already a generation of addiction that's happened because we've allowed the nicotine industry to continue as it has. And I think we've done that because we are afraid to do anything different. And it happened with cigarettes, and now it's happening with vape. I don't think there's any secret about what nicotine does to the teen brain or to the human body. And we have a true opportunity to make a difference here. I think we absolutely do. The other thing I want to point out is that EcoSlow came and said, thank you so much for putting this in place, or trying to put this in place, because vape products are littering our beaches. And we all know, they were here at the last meeting that we talked about this, and they said that it's adding plastics to our beaches. That's what these products are doing. And we had to fight cigarette products on our beaches for years, and we still have to fight that. And it's a huge detriment to marine mammals, to folks that go to the beach, to animals, birds, what have you on our beaches. Many communities are starting to say, and I think an ordinance was recently put forward or passed, saying that you can't have these products on the sand. And we are a beach community that constantly talks about protecting and promoting our coast, bringing tourists here, and I just don't see how we don't have the courage to continue to move forward. And I have no problem with the way the process was done, because we had a majority vote at the last meeting. And so it makes sense to me, the majority spoke, it makes sense to me that we would put this on consent. And I don't see any reason to go back. And it doesn't sound to me like we're out of step with the state, with the county, with other cities, or with the federal government at this time. I don't think we're lone rangers in this at all. I think we're doing the right thing. And it's my hope that we can keep our 3 votes and move forward.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, so under Robert's Rules of Order, technically, if we're going to be tabling a motion, we should just have a vote on that. We're not actually discussing the motion itself. If the issue is whether or not we're going to vote on not approving the second reading, then of course we still have a first reading done. So it just depends on the vehicle for Councilmember McPherson's proposal that we delay, table, not do a second reading. But the motion technically was to table, so we should formally, under Robert's rules, it's not a Brown Act issue, but under Robert's rules, we should just have a vote.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Then I will go ahead and call the question and have the clerk call the question. Voice vote on tabling item A5.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
No.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
Mayor Heading?
No.
Motion carries 3-2.
Okay, that ends item A5 and the consent agenda. That brings us to item B1. Let me get to that section. If I can get there. Thank you for allowing me to shuffle papers. We are on item B1. This is a public hearing for consideration of Morro Bay Garbage Services base year rate adjustment application and adoption of resolution number 03-20. Just as a reminder for council, public hearing process will be to hear a report from staff, entertain council questions. I will then open the public hearing. Allow public comment. After public comment, I will close public comment and request from the clerk the number of valid protests close the public hearing, and then entertain a council discussion and/or motion. So with that, I will turn it over to Janine Burlingame, our management analyst. Janine, thank you for our staff report.
Thank you and good evening. On August 30th of 2019, the city received from Morro Bay Garbage Service a base year rate adjustment application with a request for increasing the solid waste rates. This application is in your staff report under attachment 2. The request initially was for 19.66%. To raise the solid waste rates effective January 1st at that time. Since the council meeting date for a public hearing for the Prop 218 process was going to need to be done, as well as have enough staff time to review the application and the financial statements that were provided therein to determine whether the rate adjustment application and proposed increases were to be considered accurate and reasonable. The timing for that shifted with the November and December dates of council having only one meeting as opposed to two, to not be able to schedule the public hearing until tonight. And so with the 218 noticing of 45 days ahead of that public hearing, that brought it to putting the notices out about the third week of November. So subsequent to the initial submittal in August, the garbage company saw increased rates to the recycling tipping fees that started in October. So with the public hearing not happening until January, we were able to incorporate a supplemental portion to the application so that they could recoup those costs as well during this base year adjustment, rather than having the garbage company be able to or have to kind of eat those costs for this next cycle of 3 years and then putting it in the next base year adjustment 3 years from now. So with that, the garbage company did a supplemental to their original request, and that is also included in attachment 2 of the staff report, and that ended up increasing or changing that proposed increase to 20.5%. The 20.5% increase is comprised of a number of different things. 6.12% is based on increased vehicle costs that include the cost for new equipment to stay current with the California Air Resources Board rules and regulations, as well as increased costs to fuel and labor costs. 3.96% is based on the net result of increases to the overall cost for operations. 2.4% is based on the implementation of the organics program that it's mandated by the state of California, and 8.02% is related to the cost for processing recyclable materials. Since the last base year rate adjustment and the 2 interims in years 2 and 3 that occurred in 2017, the solid waste and recycling industry has seen a lot of changes particularly in the recycling and green waste collection area, resulting from new state regulations regarding pay for employees, mandatory equipment upgrades, efforts to combat climate change, regulations pertaining to the handling of organic waste, as well as to the continued ban from China regarding commingled recyclables. So that combined with just the regular increases to operating costs, you're superseding this larger jump. We did do a 218 notice. As I mentioned, the notice went out in the third week of November. There was a 45-day period of time where residents could review the notice that was mailed out to them, and the property owners could review that as well, and provided for a process to protest the proposed rates. As of today at 5 o'clock, before city offices closed, we had received 39 protests. And what I'd like to do before I hand it over to council for opening it up to the public hearing and any questions and comments from the council, I'd like to introduce Peter Cron from the garbage company, Morro Bay Garbage Service. He'll be able to provide a little bit of additional information with some specifics on the different percentage increases that make up that 20.5%, as well as talk a little bit more about the changes that have occurred in the recycling industry over the past few years that have led to some of these larger increases. And then he's also available for additional questions from the council as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Peter Cron. He'll give us a brief presentation, and then we'll come back.
So one second, Ms. Burlingame, what I'd like to do is have, I'm sorry, your last, Mr. Cron? Ron, come up after I've opened the public hearing and so I want to just see if there are any questions for staff directly first. That's the usual process. So any questions for staff, for Ms. Burlingame?
I have some.
Yeah, sure. Jeff, thank you.
So thank you for that very thorough report. This is a fairly detailed issue, moving quickly. I noted in the report here that the City of San Luis rate-setting process and methodology manual is what you use to compare the costs that are being proposed. Is that right?
Correct. The current agreement that we have with the garbage company for the collection services identifies that rate-setting manual and process as how the council adopts rates and then how they handle the rate increase requests during the base year and interim years.
Okay, and every city in the county uses this manual, is that correct? Or
I don't know if every city in the county. Peter Cron may know that more since since Waste Connections owns all of the little smaller entity garbage companies, Morro Bay Garbage, San Luis Garbage, but my understanding is the vast majority of them do.
Okay, and then do you review these costs, or do you do it with Ms. Callaway, or you work together? Or
it's
you do
a
it on your own,
combination of the finance director and myself. I kind of look at the application in terms of is it conforming with the rate setting manual, the forms, do the numbers make sense? And the finance director reviews that with the financial statements that are provided to determine whether there's particular questions of something that may come up in the financial statements or the application that are of concern or need to be addressed by the garbage company.
Okay. And if I understand it correctly, this utility is similar to sewer and water in that they're entitled to what it costs for them to provide the service.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And is there a timing, a regular review of this, or do we just periodically get a notification that asking for a rate increases?
There's generally a timing for it, and it's usually around that July, August time of the year when it's coming around for the base year rate adjustment that we receive an application from the garbage company for the upcoming 3-year period. So the timing is not unusual in terms of other prior year, base year adjustments that we've received.
And it's basically a 3-year, every 3 years in July?
Yeah, so what we've done when we started doing the 218 notice, as I think in one of your email questions was how many rate adjustments have we had in the past since this particular agreement had been executed, and there were basically every year we were coming to the council with either a base year rate adjustment, which is a more complete full look of the financial data of operating costs and revenue that's generated from the prior year, determining what is going to be needed for the upcoming years and the shortness of revenue that is needed that would need to cause the adjustments to the rates. And then 2 years of what are called interim adjustments, where they're basically CPI adjustments and or adjustments to the landfill tipping fees that the garbage company has a separate contract with the county for. And we were having these every single year. So when we were starting to do the 218 process, we incorporated that 3-year process at one time, adopting the base year rates, and then also identifying, as you see in the notice and what's proposed for the recommendation, years 2 and 3 being those interim year CPI adjustments and any other particular like landfill tipping fee adjustments that are known quantities. And then after that 3-year period time, in 3 years, we would be receiving another base year application and we would go through this process again.
Okay. So I think I sent you an email with a number of questions that came from some residents, and you did respond. I got it later this afternoon. Is there any chance you could respond and read those answers so that the public who asked the questions would?
So there were, let's make sure I got the right one.
You don't have to read all of them necessarily.
No,
but there's
I
one,
wanted to make sure I had the right,
yeah, there's
right
one
pages.
that.
There were some questions with regard to the proposed rate for the city and how it compares with
Right.
like Grover Beach or the city of San Luis Obispo, and as well as the increased fees for the recycling. A large chunk of the proposed increase being coming from the recycling portion of costs, and a little more information regarding that. As well as there are some capital expenditures for trucks that were referred to in the letter, but not specified in which years, whether it would be in this upcoming 2020 year or 2021 or 2023. And another
Questions
question
about
regarding
CPI index?
contamination. So what I'd like to do is maybe bring up Peter Cron, because this is more information that the garbage company is more familiar with. I could read you the responses they provided to me, but it might be better to have Peter
I'm fine with that.
address those, and then if there are additional follow-up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Janine as staff from council?
She answered the one question that I had for her. My other questions are really for the
Okay,
Mr.
great.
Cron.
So I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask Mr. Crum, come on up, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Peter Cron. I'm with Morro Bay Garbage, and I've got with me today Mr. Jeff Claren, who's the new district manager, and Mr. Dane Johnson, who's the controller for the division. So together we could probably answer some of your questions if you want to be specific with the questions. In some of the detail within the vehicles, that was one of the questions. We're replacing two of the older vehicles in the fleet. One's a 2002 automated side loader. The other one is a 2004. They were probably the first two pieces of automated side loaders that we incorporated into Morro Bay. And they're nearing the end of their life, and so that's one of the reasons why we've pushed that forward. The other pieces, as Janine has noted, are all basically within operational costs. The 2.4% on the organics is something where we're containing the allocated space within the digester for the organic material coming out of Morro Bay. Thank you, Councilmember Keller, for your. Yeah, there it is again. We like that. Don't let my wife see it. She uses the plastic pail. Yeah. And the larger one is the 8% of recycling. And that one is driven primarily by the Chinese government's ban on recycling going from the United States to their country. That actually has taken the recycled commodities market and pretty well tanked it. Tanked is probably even an understatement, more like it cratered it. Fortunately for us, our MRF does most of its sales to domestic mills, so we don't rely upon the Chinese market. We made a conscious decision in 2010 not to rely upon the Chinese markets. So while the materials that we have that we're processing are getting recycled domestically for the most part, we're still bearing a lot of the brunt of the cost of that. It cost us probably about $40 a ton just to take mixed waste paper to the port. And so while we're picking it all up, we're processing it, and we are recycling it, we are doing it currently at a loss. I'd like to open it up if you guys have specific questions for us.
Sure, and I'll allow that, sure, if you have any questions. Sure. I think, Jeff, you had some detailed questions.
I do have some questions, but they have to do with your industry, but not with this items specifically.
Okay,
So-
then we'll wait on that then.
Yeah.
Councilmember McPherson? Sure.
Yeah, well, I noted that a lot of it had to do with the fact that you combine all of the recycling and that a lot of the increase in cost was from having to separate. And I was just wondering if you'd ever considered asking the customers to do the separation and if you've done a cost comparison of that as a way to actually reduce the costs?
The challenge with that is that we've developed an entire infrastructure based upon commingled recycling. The single stream recycling, the entire program throughout our collection program is designed to facilitate that. If we were to try and change back to, for example, the old orange bin where we actually separated the bottles and cans, just the collection infrastructure alone on that would be probably cost prohibitive. And I think it's probably premature to look at that. We're hopeful that the markets will recover to some degree, but I think that it would be cost prohibitive to make that move at this time.
So it was a decision that was made in prior years that this was the better way to go?
When we were,
and so you're set up for this current?
Right. When we were faced with
sort?
meeting the mandates of AB 939 that required us to recycle 50% of the waste, single stream recycling was seen as the mechanism to get there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm used to in a lot of other places, and that's why I wanted to know if you'd considered it and if it was possibly cheaper and if it's easy enough to switch, but you're suggesting it isn't.
It would be difficult for us to make the change.
Okay. And you also indicated that there was an increase in the amount of contamination. And have you considered doing some kind of an educational campaign or some method for training folks so that we don't have contamination?
Yeah, certainly. We're constantly in contact with the Integrated Waste Management Authority, and we're putting together a series of campaigns that could encompass everything from direct mail, social media to actually television, to continue to go out and reinforce the messages we're trying to get out there on what is recyclable and what is not.
Okay. And are there still markets for all of recyclables? And if you could just speak to like paper, plastics, aluminum cans, glass, are there still markets for all of the things that we're currently recycling?
There are, for the things that we accept that are recyclable, there are markets available for them. They are getting recycled. We're not landfilling them. That's the question. Unfortunately, the markets are commodity based. So right now, because there's an oversupply and not much of a demand because of the China ban, it's costing us money to get rid of some of these materials.
And that was my next question. How much of what we recycle ends up in the landfills?
Morro Bay specifically, it runs about a 25% contamination rate, which is right in line with just about what everybody else is doing.
And that means it's not recyclable.
Right. We get a lot of what we consider wish recycling, where people put things in there they think they might be recycling. And they're doing it with good intent, and that's why we're working with the Integrated Waste Management Authority to get more public outreach out there.
Okay. And then can you explain the wide difference in the rates for the various communities in SLO County? I think I can surmise what might be responsible for it, but if you could just explain to us why we seem to have one of the absolute highest rates, and rates go down to, well, half of what ours is. And I'm just curious to know the why. What's the reason for the difference?
Well, I'd like to bring up Mr. Dane Johnson on that, but primarily it involves with each individual community has their own rate case and their own costs involved, and so that's the driver, and it's all a function of the rate setting manual and how we assess the costs. Would you like to address that, or something?
Yeah. Can you come to the mic, please? Thank you. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Dane Johnson. I'm the controller for...
Can you do it in the mic so that for the public? Thank you.
Yeah. I'm Dane Johnson. I'm the controller for San Luis Obispo Garbage. The rate manual is cost-based. With South County, it's kind of an economies of scale. It's very condensed and close together. It's close to the landfill, close to the MRF. It costs a little less money to do business there. They were 10%. I think San Luis Obispo was about 14%. And then Los Osos, Cambria, Cayucos, they just got hit with 25 to 26%, depending on the area. So we try to allocate costs relative to the service area, and Morro Bay was pretty high.
So is it related to the kind of trash that you pick up in Morro Bay, or the amount of recycling you pick up? Or I'm just curious to know why we're so different from other communities, that's all.
Yeah. I mean, tonnage is taken into account, mileage, fuel. It's a lot of different variables. I mean, we're trying to streamline those costs to the respective areas. I don't know if in the past we've been as detailed, but we really try to get an accurate cost of what it takes to do business here.
To do it, all right. And I think you started to answer my last question, which is, are other communities getting similar rate increases as Morro Bay is here, 20%?
Yeah, Cayucos, Cambria, and Los Osos were 26%. I think Cambria was a little lower.
In the same ballpark.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick one, and maybe you answered this somewhere or said it, and I apologize if I missed it. But is there any help for folks on the garbage rates who just can't afford them, like the utility discount program? And if so, how do they access?
Yeah, Morro Bay doesn't currently offer that, but they do offer a 19-gallon service, which is considerably lower than a lot of the services out there. And that's, the 19-gallon can, it's a smaller can. It still offers them the same level. They get to choose the recycling level and the green waste level, but it is incentive-based about not creating waste.
Do other communities offer any kind of a discount program?
Some do, and it varies from community to community.
And are they local?
Yes, they're all, yeah. We have some offers low-income rates.
Okay.
Great.
One more.
Oh, yes, sure.
So,
go ahead, Jeff.
Education is a huge piece, as you've mentioned, and I brought stickers, to different meetings and hand them out and so forth. And I've talked with IWMA for the past year about education. What is Morro Bay Garbage Service doing in an educational perspective?
Primarily, we also work with the Integrated Waste Management Authority promoting the school programs. We also sticker all the cans that we put out, and we continue to go out there and try and make sure that we do mailers and a direct mail program. The next mailer that you'll see will have the no plastic bags and the recycling. That'll come into your direct mail. And so we're constantly trying to do the outreach, and we're going to work more and more on that. And mostly in conjunction with the Integrated Waste Management Authority to keep it that single voice, that single message, because it's important that we maintain a single message.
Okay, thanks.
Great. General public comment is open. For anybody else who would like to come forward and make public comment regarding item B1, please do so now. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. It sounds like some of my questions were answered, and that our rates are higher because we're further away from the landfill. But I would still like to know, maybe this is a Ms. Burlingame question, if we're using a manual that San Luis uses, and that manual says that we should use the CPI from the U.S. city average rather than the local CPI, maybe that manual's not servicing the people if that's requiring our increases to go up, or is that CPI not part of the manual and we're using that for a different reason, would be one of my questions. The question about the trucks was not answered. If one was brought into service in 2002 and one's in 2004, I'm wondering why those costs, again, can't be staggered and why they have to be done all at once to give us this higher percentage increase. And it sounded like that the co-mingling of the recycling and that method that they're using, which was of benefit in the past, is not going to shift until maybe we decide we're not going to pay so much for the commingling, that they're going to have to figure out a different way to do that. And I think that's on your shoulders to say, how far are we willing to raise our rates until they figure out another way to do commingling or undo commingling so we can get a better recycling method. And then I'm going to surmise from the introduction by staff that the way that this got delayed was a staff decision as opposed to a council decision. I think that's what you said earlier. And if you could clarify that, that would be great.
Thank you. Public comment is still open for item B1. Any member of the public wishing to come forward, please do so now. Seeing none, I will close public comment. I'm closing public comment, but I'd just like to get responses to the questions that were asked, and if we could get a response regarding the CPI question for Ms. Burlingame.
The CPI that is used is in the agreement that we have with the garbage company. So it spells it out there, not in the rate-setting manual. What a potential solution could be, if that's something that is amenable to the finance director, to the garbage companies, we can always do an amendment to the agreement and identify a different CPI level, whether it be the local or some other. But that would be something that we would need to take a look at, do an evaluation on, to make a determination whether that would be beneficial, and then bring an amendment forward.
And again, could you reiterate the rationale or the problem of the delay? She just asked that question.
The staff received at the end of August the rate adjustment application. Staff then needed to review that rate application, and we completed that in early November. And so when we started looking at the 45-day period that we would need to do the 2018 noticing for the Prop 218 process, and where that would land, council, that was putting us somewhere close to the middle part of December, and council didn't have a second December meeting. So the next available meeting was tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not sure I understand. I think I understand the truck question. Did you anybody want to come up, your controller? Do you want to come up and address the 2002, 2004 staggering of costs question?
Yeah, so when we buy the trucks, the rate manual states we have to amortize them over 7 years. We got pretty good use out of the 2002 and the 2004. So after 7 years, the cost of that truck is wiped from our depreciation schedule, and those costs are no longer on the books. When we do buy these new trucks, we have to add that expense back in. We try to get as much use as a truck as we can, but 2 new trucks is pretty spendy.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, can you make a statement indicating the number of protests received and indicate whether the amount is a majority of the customer/property owners as of this time?
As of this time, 39 written protests, which have not been validated or verified, have been received by the city clerk's office, which does not constitute a majority protest.
Thank you. I will now close the public hearing, bring it back to council, and entertain a motion unless there's further discussion. All right, then I will move the staff recommendation that we approve resolution number 03-20, increasing solid waste rates as outlined in the fiscal impact section of this report, staff report, because of the fact that there is not a majority protest against such increase.
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Heading to approve the staff recommendation for the resolution, a second by Councilmember McPherson. Any further discussion or comment? Yes, Councilmember.
I just have one comment. Obviously, no one wants rates to go up. There's a cost associated with how much we send to the landfill. So I think people who are really concerned about the increased rates, and I'm starting to think in these terms, is to think about what we send to the landfill that maybe we don't need to send to the landfill. Make sure we're putting the right stuff in the right can. Lots of things we can do as individuals to reduce the cost of this service. So that's all.
And thank you, Councilmember Heller, for being our representative on IMWA. Way back when I was a representative and enjoyed that, and your participation is very meaningful, and I appreciate your questions this evening and your advocacy for recycling, and I really want to read your jar a little bit later. But with that, if there are no... sure, Councilmember Addis.
I just bought a new recycling can at the break, so thank you for sharing yours, but can I just ask one more question of the representative?
Sure.
So if Morro Bay doesn't have a discount program and other communities do have a discount program locally, how would we get one started?
And so I've closed the public hearing, and that's maybe I'm going to look to council, to our council. Should we look at it as a future agenda item, or is that appropriate for discussion now?
During discussion, that's okay. The public hearing was to see whether or not there was going to be a majority protest. That has concluded, and now the council is discussing whether or not to actually approve the rates, which is technically a separate action item.
Didn't want to get my hand slapped. Thank you. Continue.
That was it. Just how would we start a program here if we wanted to have a garbage discount program? Is it staff?
Perhaps looking at another community's program?
I don't know if this is a question for staff or for Morro Bay Garbage representatives.
Maybe I can add a little. So typically with utilities, the subsidization of rates occurs from non-rate revenue. So the money would have to come from somewhere other than the garbage rates. So it could be funded by general fund, contributions by other ratepayers, but it can't come from the ratepayers can't subsidize through the rates of those rates. So I think it might be a future agenda item to decide if we want to have another revenue stream dedicated to low-income rates like we do with our water sewer. That money comes from non-rate revenue.
So even though it's not really our utility, the city would pay to bring those rates down?
If I could jump in, so this issue revolves around the fact that we had a public hearing on this, Prop 218 hearing. So we can't charge the individual ratepayer more to subsidize other folks' rates because we can only charge them cost basically, and then a reasonable profit for the garbage company. So we can't add into that. We're going to subsidize other ratepayers. However, if the city wanted to itself, through the general fund or some other financing mechanism, provide some sort of discount program for those who qualify, that could be an agenda item for the future, certainly.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, and look for a roll call vote.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
And Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, and thank you for being here this evening, and thank you, Janine, for your excellent presentation. Appreciate that. That moves us to agenda item C1. As a reminder, the Morro Bay Public Finance, MBPFC met at 5:30 and covered this item in detail. These are the actions required by the City Council, so we'll look for an abbreviated presentation from staff on this, and then entertain questions, et cetera. So with that, I will turn it over to the same group, Mr. Livick, Mr. Casares, Ms. Luck, and Ms. Callaway.
He's on his way.
Okay, great. Subject matter, by the way, is adoption of Resolution 04-20 approving financing of the water reclamation facility project with proceeds from the United States Environmental Protection Agency under the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, WIFIA. Thank you. Mr. Casares, welcome back.
I think we'll follow the same format. Let Mr. Newmeyer introduce and go from there.
Thank you.
Good evening again, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. We have before the City Council now 4 agreements for consideration for approval, which would allow for the financing through the federal government WIFIA loan of the water reclamation facility. This is in conjunction with the Morro Bay Public Facility Corporation meeting that occurred earlier tonight. That meeting approved 6 agreements, 4 with the city government itself, specifically the city of Morro Bay, 2 with the federal government. To clarify now, we're looking at the 4 agreements between the City Council and the corporation. The substance of those agreements are the same. It's just that we're only looking at 4 of the 6 agreements now. And I would like to turn this over now to our program manager, Eric Caceres, and also my co-counsel, Anita Luck, and myself are available to answer any legal questions related to this matter.
Thank you, Chris. Eric?
Thank you, Chris. So we went through this presentation earlier. We're going to go through it briefly here and hit some of the highlights. Again, the pursuit of the low-interest loans is something that the city has been doing for the last 3 or 4 years, and it really comes down to one of the main tenets of the project of maintaining ratepayer affordability or minimizing the impacts to ratepayers, which is why we're here today. The WIFIA loan that we're specifically considering tonight was part of the funding options that we had in front of us when we developed the rate study back in 2018. As was mentioned earlier, the city was selected as one of 12 agencies with an innovative project to submit an application for the WIFIA money, and around the time of the preparation of the rate study, the city had submitted that final application. Based on that action, I thought it was prudent to assume that the WIFIA money would become part of the funding for the overall project. A couple of other funding mechanisms from the state board, mainly an SRF construction loan. Because of where we were in the process, that was not one of the funding options that we brought forward and used in the rate analysis. The 2018 rate study was an extension of the 2015 rate study, essentially bridging the gap between a smaller project that was envisioned back in 2015 in combination or in partnership with the Cayucas versus a different project that was solely being undertaken by the city of Morro Bay. The slide up here shows the breakdown of the cost between the different project components. We have the water reclamation facility itself, the conveyance facilities that connect the existing wastewater treatment plant to the new water reclamation facility, the recycled water facilities, i.e. the injection wells that'll be used to put purified water into the ground, as well as the general program cost associated with the project. It was important to go through the exercise of splitting up the cost between and allocating those costs between wastewater and water. There is a water component to this project, as it is going to be offsetting a large portion of the city's current water demand, and we did that because different funding agencies wanted to look at and fund different ratios from those different funds. So in 2018, we assumed that the project would be paid for in a combination of WIFIA, conventional bonds, and cash. Again, SRF was not part of kind of the base case scenario that was evaluated. So the base case scenario is shown in this table here, the $41 surcharge that folks should be familiar with, that was taken through the 218 process and went into effect in July of this year. And as you can see, there's a couple other scenarios that exemplify a couple of things. One is the impacts of potential SRF funding when we get those funds, and the impacts that can have on the rates. The other is the impact of WIFIA on the project itself. Again, $125 million project, financed with WIFIA, or funded by WIFIA money, is roughly the same cost of a $100 million project funded by bonds without any recycled water, without a recycled water component. The overall impact to the city's ratepayers was determined to be $191 per month for the combined water and sewer rates, and that's for the average user using 5 units of water. Things have changed in the time that the rate study was adopted back in the middle of 2018. We have now been put on the list to receive a construction loan from SRF, the State Revolving Fund, to the tune of approximately $100 million. And also the interest rates have been reduced for the main funding mechanisms that we're looking at. Mainly, WIFIA has gone from about 3.25%. To about 2.4%, and for the SRF, we've gone from about 1.7 to the 1.6 that we're using here, but it was discussed earlier, the current SRF rates are down around 1.2%. Our SRF position has changed because we have been placed on the list to receive funding for this upcoming fiscal year. That process occurred through the beginning of 2019, where we received our score. Our score was a favorable score, mostly because of the innovative nature of the project and the use of recycled water. So the mix of funding is different. So we've got our WIFIA component to the tune of about $49 million. The same for the SRF loan is what we're assuming. $5 million for the SRF grant, and then the remaining being funded by cash on hand. This is a breakdown of those costs between the water and sewer utilities. And really the benefit, again, why the city has gone through this lengthy process is the benefits in terms of the reduction in the cost of the project. So the WIFIA loan, as we're discussing here tonight, it has the potential to save the city $28 million in debt service. With that, I can take any additional questions.
Thank you. I'll just start and ask Ms. Luck. Could you explain what action the Morro Bay Public Facilities Corporation took and now why it requires city council action and what action specifically the council is being asked to take at this time?
Sure. Earlier, the City Council, which also acts as the board of the Morro Bay Public Facilities Corporation, approved the 3 agreements that they are a party to. One was an installment sale agreement, and this is for each of the water and wastewater project, wherein the corporation sells the plant to the city, and the city makes installment payments to the corporation. The second agreement is the assignment agreement, where the corporation assigns its stream of payments from the city to the federal government so that the federal government will provide the funding for the project. And the third agreement is an agreement between the federal government, the city, and the corporation, wherein the federal government gives the conditions under which it will provide the funding and describes how the funding will be a drawdown loan and the conditions to disbursements and things relevant to the loan. The action that will be taken by the City Council now is to approve its side of the installment sale agreement. It's agreeing to make those payments to the corporation. It's consenting to the fact that the corporation's assigning all the payments to the federal government and that it will make payments directly to the federal government from now on. And it's also consenting to the conditions for disbursement of the loan and how the loan proceeds will be spent. So those are the 3, the 2 agreements that they're entering into on each side. They're not entering into the assignment agreement, but they're consenting that the corporation entered into the assignment agreement.
Thank you for that. And
You're welcome.
I will ask council if there are any additional questions that you may have or that you wish to repeat at this time for staff or council? Legal counsel, no? Seeing none, I will open up general public comment for item C-1. Any member of the public wishing to come forward, please do so now regarding item C-1. Welcome back, Betty.
It's a busy night. I have a question that I sent you, and if you could just clarify this, and then I have another question that's come to mind. But in the staff report, paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, under the discussion section, there were 2 amounts of money, one with regard to wastewater and one with regard to water, and it seemed not to be consistent from paragraph to paragraph. And I was just wondering if that $37 million in the first paragraph relates to the $22.1 million in the second paragraph, and why there's a discrepancy there, because the other 2 numbers seem to match. And so that's one question to clarify. And my last question is, should the city not be able to do the recycling portion of this project, having received money with the intent from WIFIA that that's our whole goal is to do the recycling? Do we then pay back the money, and is there a penalty or no penalty with that payback?
Thank you. Public comment is still open. Any member of the public wishing to come forward on item C1, please do so now. Hearing no footsteps, seeing no movement, I will close public comment, bring it back. Mr. Casares and/or staff, Ms. Winholt's question regarding the $37 million versus the $22.1 million, or Ms. Callaway. Could you give us an explanation of that?
So,
That's on the staff report.
Yeah, I'll
page
jump
1
in
and 2
and
in the
then-
discussion. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll jump in, and then our project manager and public works director can correct me, but the resolution is to authorize $26 million for wastewater, $37 million for water. That is full financing of the 49% of the project. The $22.1 million that's referenced is if we were to use the cash we have on hand, which was the intent in the rate study. We've built in capacity here because, as the public works director said, this is a line of credit, so we'll only draw down what we need, but we want to be safe since SRF isn't completed yet, that we do have capacity to draw down as much as we were allowed.
And second part, if there's any indication that recycling cannot be done, is this money at risk regarding payback?
That's a conversation we'd have to have with the funding agencies. The funding agencies, as I mentioned previously, they've performed a thorough review of the project based on all of the information available. For WIFIA specifically, it's an environmental, a technical, and a financial review. And so they looked at our plan to reuse the water with injection. We've done the feasibility study that shows that we have the minimum travel time. So I don't think there's a risk of not being able to do it, and it's something that that the WIFIA staff have looked at, and we have not discussed that with them.
Okay. Any comment from council? No? Okay, great. Thank you. So with that, I'll just give a brief summary of perhaps the salient issues that were brought forward earlier at the Morro Bay Public Facilities Corporation meeting. This, as was presented, is the culmination of many years' work by our staff. We are very thankful for what they've done and appreciate them being recognized, or this project being recognized as 1 in 12 in the nation that is being recommended to receive WIFIA funding because of its innovative capabilities. The project itself, with regard to this funding, requires the establishment of the corporation that I just mentioned previously. It acts, in my term, as a firewall between the city and the corporation, and it protects the city against encumbering any other assets besides the water and sewer fund. If I'm correct or incorrect in stating this, council, correct me. And that's one of the purposes, or one of the main purposes of that. The securitization for the loan is the water and sewer rates. This is a drawdown loan. It doesn't mean that the maximum of 61 point whatever it is $1 million is going to be utilized. It will be drawn upon at a rate that now currently is about 2.17%, but at the time of signing, which may be a few months from now, could be between 2.2 and 2.4%, which is much less than the anticipated bond rate that was used to set the rates when we initially did the study. Early indicators indicate that for WIFIA funding only, there'll be a debt service savings of approximately $28 million. This does not include SRF, or State Revolving Fund money, that we have been more or less promised, and we are on the funding list for that. and that will offer us additional reduction in debt service in the future as we culminate that agreement. What we're being asked to do tonight is to approve or adopt the resolution that approving the proceedings to finance the new water reclamation facility from the proceeds of 2 installment agreements between the city and the Morro Bay Public Facilities Corporation. As each agreement is assigned to the United States Environmental Protection Agency and related documentation. Specifically, the City Council is being asked to approve Resolution 4-20, authorizing 3 items. 1, approves the wastewater system project installment sale agreement, consents to assignment to U.S. EPA, and approves the wastewater pledge collateral pursuant to Section 4.5A of the wastewater installment sale agreement. 2, approves the the water system project installment sale agreement, consents to assignment to U.S. EPA, and approves the water pledge collateral pursuant to Section 4.5A of the water installment sale agreement. And 3, approves of the WIFIA credit agreement to the wastewater system project and the WIFIA credit agreement water system project. And I will make that as a motion.
I will second that motion.
Motion by Mayor Heading to adopt staff recommendation with approval of the Resolution 420 and the 3 items mentioned. Second by Councilmember McPherson. Any other discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
And Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Again, my thanks to staff for all of the hard work that you have done over the years, to legal counsel for allowing and making this happen from a legal standpoint. We look forward to further reductions potentially in our debt service as we obtain SRF funding, and look into the future with regard to the possibility and likelihood of being able to slightly or decrease rates to the inline user in the future. Thank you for that. That brings us, do we need a break, or how are we doing here? Biofluid break, are we okay? Keep moving? We can turn the heat on. We had a request for heat. We'd be happy to do that. It's getting cold out there. Ready to go? Okay. That brings us to item C-2, authorization for the city manager to sign a non-binding memorandum of understanding, or MOU, between the Cayucas Sanitary District, Trust for Public Lands, Chevron, and the city of Morro Bay for conservation of lots 6 Southwest and 6 Northwest, more commonly known as Dog Beach. And I will turn it over to, I believe, Mr. Graham for presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Heading, members of council. As was indicated, the item before you this evening is to authorize the city manager to sign a non-binding memorandum of understanding between the Cayucas Sanitary District, the Trust for Public Lands, Chevron, and the city of Morro Bay for conservation of lots 6SW and 6 Northwest, which are shown on the maps in your staff report, and which are more commonly known as Dog Beach. A little bit of background on the subject. As the council is well aware, we've been working on conservation efforts related to the larger Chevron properties for many years. And we've been working with the county, Trust for Public Lands, the Cayucas Sanitary District, Cayucas Land Conservancy, the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo, and Chevron, looking at various opportunities to preserve some portion of the 3,200-acre larger, Chevron property. This MOU represents one of the first steps in this conservation process, and includes effectively 4 actions. The first of which would be the acquisition of lot 6SW, which is sort of the southern portion of Dog Beach. You can kind of see it at the, well, that's not a, can't see it great. It's toward the,
can't hear you when you turn.
Sorry about that. It's located at the sort of bottom of that map, 6SW, and then 6 Northwest is sort of in the middle of that lot, adjacent to lot 1 on the map. Currently, the lots 6SW and 6NW are owned by the CSD. They purchased it from Chevron several months ago. The Trust for Public Lands has the intent to purchase those lots, 6SW and 6 North SNW, from the CSD, and would convey those to the city through a donation agreement via direct deed, without the city needing to purchase it or spend any money on those lots. There's also the purchase agreement that was entered into between the CSD and Chevron includes a residual rights clause on Lot 6SW that would allow Chevron to repurchase the 6SW within 2 years if the panorama lots were not annexed into the city. Staff sat down with Chevron, and explained to them that it's very unlikely because it involves a vote of the people, and it would be a fairly long process to make that happen. And so this MOU refers to some language where that's not the requirement, and I'll kind of get to that in a second. Moving into action item 2, the city would amend its sphere of influence to include the 5 lots above panorama. Those are sort of the clear lots that are on the map in your packet and on the board and on the screen above. It is the intent of Chevron to annex those 5 lots eventually. Chevron understands that any annexation of those lots would require a vote of the citizens of Morro Bay at this point. Each of those lots would accommodate a single home. And the intent is to have those homes located towards the bottom of those lots to help preserve the hillside views above and beyond the northern portion of the city. A sphere of influence amendment does require council authorization and then subsequent submittal of an application to LAFCO and then LAFCO approval. The MOU, as I indicated a minute ago, it does indicate that Chevron will terminate that residual rights clause for the repurchase upon a timely submittal to LAFCO of the SOI application and some concurrence on the part of LAFCO that they support such an application. Action item 3 involves the detachment of lot 6NE. It is currently located within at the northern boundary of the city. It is within the city's limits. The Cayucas Sanitary District maintains their sewer lift station on that property, and as part of these negotiations, has requested that the city basically de-annex the property from the city, which is what the detachment is referring to. Lot 6N, again, NE is again owned by the CSD. That also requires council authorization, a future submittal to LAFCO, and then subsequent LAFCO approval. The fourth and last item contained in the MOU would be the annexation of Lot 6 Northwest by the city of Morro Bay, so bringing it into the city. It is currently in the city's sphere of influence. It is one of 2 pieces of property that are that make up the city's sphere of influence. There's the Dog Beach portion, and then there's a portion that's in the bay adjacent to the State Park Marina. And I think that piece is there to accommodate, future dredging of that area, is my understanding. Anyway, the idea here is that Trust for Public Lands would purchase Lot 6 Northwest from the CSD and then convey that to the city, as I previously indicated. And then that annexation requires council authorization and subsequent approval by LAFCO. So those are the 4 items that are included in the MOU. This is a picture of the map. You'll see on the map that it includes future phases. Trust for Public Lands, along with all of the other agencies and organizations I referred to earlier, are looking at other options for preserving other lots out there, and those efforts are ongoing. You'll notice on the map at the top there is Lot 1, not referenced in the MOU because that involves the Trust for Public Lands in the county, and Trust for Public Lands has raised money to purchase that Lot 1, and that would be turned over to the county. That would provide a buffer for development between both the city of Morro Bay and Cayucas, so keeping those communities separate, which is a laudable action, I think. So what happens if council authorizes the city manager to sign the MOU? If that is the case, the result of this evening's action, then staff would return to council at a future meeting date, likely your next council meeting with most of these items, with resolutions and so forth to authorize those submittals for applications to LAFCO. So staff's recommendation is that the council authorize the city manager to sign the non-binding MOU between TPL and the CSD and Chevron, initiating the first steps in the city acquiring Dog Beach and maintaining it in permanent public ownership. At this point, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. That was a fast and very comprehensive presentation for an item that has been worked on for a number of years. So with that, I'm going to open it up for council questions. Any questions of Mr. Graham?
I just have two small ones.
Sure. Councilmember McPherson, go ahead, please.
Okay. Under MOU action number 2, you suggested that they will terminate this residual rights clause, which I know we all had concerns about when we heard about it in closed session, and upon a timely submittal to LAFCO and LAFCO's support. Could you just tell us what timely means and what LAFCO is going to have to do to show their support?
The LAFCO support piece would simply be staff supporting the application, meaning they don't see anything that's wrong with it and they support the concept. Obviously, any approval of those documents has to go to the LAFCO board, so staff doesn't have a say in that. It's just that the LAFCO staff, accepts the application, understands the reasoning behind it. They've been involved with the process from the beginning. As far as sitting down with us and going over all of the machinations and the moving parts for this, they've been involved from the beginning. So there's no surprise there. Largely, to this point, they've expressed support for this, given that the various agencies, the county and the city and the CSD also support it. And so mostly, I don't think that's an issue. But they want to see that coming forward before they'd be willing to remove that clause. Timely means within the next couple of months. I mean, we're bringing it forward right now, so it's going to follow, this council meeting, assuming you authorize a signature, then we're going to bring it right back to you. So our submittal will be to them pretty quickly within the next month or so.
And then they will remove that clause, which we...
So as we go through, and how does that get resolved? Well, we would get the concurrence from the LAFCO staff, and then at some point in between there, we probably have our application in front of them, and we said, okay, we've met all of our requirements, please remove the clause. If they didn't, we just pull our applications from LAFCO, and because they wouldn't be working with us at that point. But they
that would
understand
be the end of the deal then.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then another small question. On MOU action number 4, you said TPL, upon purchase, proposes to convey Lot 6 NW to the city. And again, is that at no cost?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm that.
Okay. Other council questions? Getting to my... Yes, Councilmember Heller, sir.
So Dog Beach, I just got a dog, so I'm a dog fan now. Dog Beach apparently is used a lot by people who live in Morro Bay, right? Used for years for that purpose, I understand. Do we need to make it part of our, do we need to own it? I mean, doesn't that obligate us to providing whatever services might be needed up there?
It's a good question. The county doesn't currently provide service to it. The city could choose to do the same once it came into city ownership. We could do nothing with it. We could choose to provide trash service to it or not. It's up to the city and up to the city council about what kind of service you would expect to have out there. I would say this: the only reason that it's in the city's sphere of influence is when the LAFCO went through our sphere review back in 2007. The city's sphere of influence went well outside of the city boundaries. In fact, probably included a land mass that was larger than the actual square footage within the city. And LAFCO at that time said, city, you don't have services, meaning water, to develop these areas. And so they pulled the sphere of influence back to the city boundary lines, with the exception of Dog Beach, because City of Morro Bay residents wanted Dog Beach, and so that was conveyed to LAFCO, and so they left that in the sphere of influence. And then there's also that piece that's in the bay. It's, I think, related to ability to dredge that area or something. But so that was the desire of the community of Morro Bay, and you leave things in your sphere of influence because that means you have some intent in the future to annex that into your city.
Okay, so in regarding the 5 lots and the proviso that there would be one house per lot and so forth, that obligates the city at some point in time, if we annex it in, to provide services to those 5 lots, right?
To what would be 5 homes, correct?
Yeah.
We're saying that we'd be willing to do that, yes.
I'm sorry, say that?
Yes, we would be saying that we would be willing to do that, yes.
Okay. And what is the timeline like for doing that? I mean, this has to go before the vote of the people, or I'm getting mixed up on the measure that was passed years ago.
Yeah, so we had a referendum that was passed many years ago that said any annexations into the city for other than public purposes would require a vote of our citizens. That's in our municipal code. So that's the process that they would have to follow. We've had lengthy conversations with Chevron about what that means, and that means they're going to have to conduct a public outreach campaign and go through that process. They're aware of that. And so that's what you would see coming down the pike in the future if they want to have those lots in the future annexed into the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions to my left? Councilmember
I think
Evans?
that was most of mine. I think the big worry that I'm going to hear from most people is, does this mean for sure we're building houses there? I think that's the perception people are going to come to me with is, I know you got Dog Beach, but now you're going to build houses. And I think what I'm hearing is we could, but it's not, signing this MOU is not a guarantee that there would be houses there.
No, it is saying that the city would be willing to accept that, and now we've had this conversation for many years as well, because we've been in the process of updating our general plan and local coastal program for several years. And that area in our draft documents is shown as proposed sphere of influence, so this isn't a new concept. And that is also direction that previous council gave as it relates to our draft land use map, is that was an acceptable idea and concept to preserve the backdrop to the city. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Question?
Yeah.
Sure. Council.
When you say as a backdrop to the city, so to me that implies that the effort to bring those properties into our sphere of influence, the panorama properties, and restrict the building to the lower section of those lots is actually to preserve open space in that area as part of, I guess, an open space belt around as much of the city as we can accomplish. Is that correct?
Correct. Those lots, it's interesting, those lots that sit directly above us have kind of a false ridge in the middle of them. And that's the area where the concern comes up. Potentially under county ordinances, you could build houses up there because it's not actually the top of the lots. And so, yeah, there's a concern that halfway up that slope, behind, like 600 feet above the houses that are there, you could have houses, kind of in that area. It would essentially ruin the backdrop there from a view standpoint, I think. And that's that's what the citizens of Morro Bay conveyed as we went through the general plan update process. There was concern related to that. Certainly, staff pointed it out as an issue as we spoke with county staff and said, well, what are the ramifications of not doing anything, or what are the county's policies related to development? Because they do have development that prohibit development on ridges, but again, there's a false ridge that wouldn't be considered a ridge top, in the under county ordinance. And they said, oh yeah, they could put houses further up the slopes. And the General Plan Advisory Committee and Planning Commission, all of were concerned about that, and so hence the incorporation of that area and designation in the draft land use map as future sphere of influence.
Yeah, I do remember lengthy conversations when I've served on GPAC, and I think Councilmember Heller was there at that time as well. Mm-hmm. So, okay.
So, just to follow up with what Councilmember Davis said, is this not the best way for the city to preserve the panoramic lots with minimal development with regard to this single house concept? And in the absence of doing this, isn't there the possibility that Chevron then with their control could move forward and do extensive development there?
Under the county right now, the county's underneath the current zoning that's out there, which is agriculture, it allows development of one single-family home. We would follow suit and have this similar limitation under similar zoning. In my opinion, that is probably the best way to preserve it and to direct what happens to the backdrop of the city, at least in the, as much as we can, for those lots that abut ours. Obviously, Chevron has divested themselves of several of the lots, that are more inland to folks. And so their intent, and they looked at these lots, they tested them to see if they could drill wells on them to get water, whether they could provide water from the existing wells that they have on their site because they have rights to that water. So they've looked into all of these types of things, to what it would take to develop the lots out there. So certainly that was an intent behind, from Chevron.
Is there increased risk to the city if we annex in Dog Beach? Liability?
It's not dissimilar to our existing parks and things like that. We would have, it's the same type of thing. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I have no further questions. With that, I'll open up public comment on item C2. Any member of the public wishing to come forward, please do so now. Betty, welcome back.
So you've referred to, but I don't think you said why in recital number 9, the vote of the people was left out, and if that's going to be put back in. I think it's interesting that you haven't said the size of these lots, like how big are they, how many square feet are they? And when you say that they'll be single family, we know that single family in Morro Bay does not mean single family because it can also have a second unit on it, and whatever comes down from the state, maybe even more. So I think to say that those are single lots, only 5 houses, is probably not the real vision of what could potentially happen. And so I'd like to know the size of those lots, and I'd like to know who's going to pay the cost of providing sewer and water up to those lots. Is that by the owner who purchases that lot, or is the city obliged to pay for that cost to get up those hills, even if it's just across the creek? And I think it is important to note, as I mentioned to you in my email, that it doesn't matter whether the city owns the dog beaches, because we have prescriptive rights as the public over decades and decades of use. And it's not just Morro Bay people, but it's people from around the county, because there's only 2 beaches in the whole county where dogs are allowed off leash, and that's at Avila and here between Cayucas and Morro Bay. So it's very popular, very important, and it is the reason why it was brought into our sphere of influence back in 2008, is because all the dog people in the county wrote to or came to the LAFCO hearing and said, we want that preserved, because the option at that time was for it to go to state parks, and state parks removes dogs from beaches. And so it was real important to the public to maintain a place for their dogs. And referring to the land just as a piece of information of why the Grassy Island, or the land near Grassy Island in the bay, was put into the sphere of influence, was not for dredging, but was in a way of trying to curb hunting in the bay. Because at that time, you could not shoot guns inside the city limits, and the state legislator, after that action on our part, said, well, the state controls that, the city can't say you can't hunt inside of a city. So, but that's, just for your information, that's why that's there. Thanks.
Interesting history, thank you. Public comment still open for item C2. Any members of the public wishing to come forward, please do so now. Looking around, seeing none. Seeing sedation, I will close public comment and bring it back. Could you just comment on the size of the lots, Scott, please?
I don't have the size of the lots in front of me right now. I'm sorry. I didn't bring that information with me.
Quote unquote, Ms. Windholt says it's not the real vision to build just single family homes there. Is there a vision you know of that has been articulated by the council or staff? I wrote down, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm speaking. Thank you. Any comment on that?
The intent, whatever conversation that we've had about those lots, is to have one house on them.
Thank you. And who bears the cost for sewer and water? Which of those hookups?
Whoever develops those lots will extend the services out to them.
Thank you. With that, I'll bring it back to council and either entertain a motion.
Yes. I move that we authorize the city manager to sign a non-binding MOU between the City of Morro Bay, Cayuga Sanitary District, Trust for Public Lands, and Chevron for conservation and city ownership of lots 6 SW and 6 NW Dog Beach, as shown on attachment A of the MOU.
Second. Motion by Council Member Davis for staff report, staff recommendation, second by Mayor Heading. And I'll open any further comments, discussion, I just
want to say thank you, because our family has gone to Dog Beach, as have many families in Morro Bay, for the entire childhood of my children, taking the animals there. And so for us, it's a sentimental piece. I think it's good for Morro Bay. I'm super excited to take this step. I think it's the beginning of really good things. So thank you for all your work on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Addis. I will add my thanks not only to staff for this has been a long process, a lot of work, a number of closed session meetings. Thank you, Council, for that. But for Councilmember Davis, who's been involved for quite a long time on the subcommittee prior to, I think, myself joining you. Thank you for all of the work that you have done to help make this happen. Thank you to Supervisor Gibson, who's been an integral part of this, making this happen as well. With that, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Please, voice vote.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes.
Mayor Heading.
Yes.
Councilmember Addis.
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
And Councilmember McPherson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Graham and staff. We appreciate that. Thank you, Councilor Luck. Thank you for being here tonight. That brings us to item C-3. This is a recommendation to receive the update on our goals, and I will turn it over to our esteemed city manager, Mr. Collins, who is readying his lengthy presentation. No.
Thank you, Mayor, Council members. Scott Collins, City Manager. I'll give you a brief update on the accomplishments and work towards achieving the goals established by City Council for 2019 and 2020. We're into the second year of the goal process. And also talk about the process briefly for next time around. So the goals as established by Council last year, which hold true for this year. First listed, which was also emphasized the most by Council, is to help achieve economic fiscal sustainability. The second, and all of those are sort of tied for second. Oh, there it goes already. Scott, can you help me? I think another goal should be fixing the PowerPoint at City Council meetings.
Second.
Sorry, couldn't help myself. The other goals are to improve infrastructure and public spaces, complete the update of the significant city land use plans, and address affordable housing issues. And last but certainly not least, and tied amongst all the others, is to improve communication and community engagement. All right, let's try it again. All right. As a reminder, the goals and action items were approved in May of 2019. For the remainder of 2019 as well as all of 2020. Fiscal sustainability was the top priority. We, as council, have adopted 26 action items to help achieve those goals, and staff committed to bringing quarterly updates, so do our best to make that. It's a little harder to see here, but I believe you have copies in the agenda packet. The first set of items here before you are those that have been completed. The first of which was Council wanted staff to bring forward revenue enhancement options for review, and we did accomplish that last year. Since that time, City, through our consultants, have conducted opinion research, the results of which have been placed on our city website, and now we're engaging in a significant community engagement process to take that to the next step and understand, share kind of the needs and understand the community desires and bring forward those results as part of our budget process for 2021, 2022, is that right? 2020, 2021, sorry. And then the others achieved action items are the Ombudsman service contract with the Chamber to help pursue our economic development goals. Consideration of VR to be added into the TBID, which was done by the end of last calendar year. And then Council checked off the partnership policy review and reviewed that and made some enhancements to it. And we intend to bring forward new partnership agreements for council consideration this year. And then some of the items that have had, pretty significant work towards it include the fee study. As you all know, we approved a significant number of fees to be increased over a phased-in approach for some full amount this year. We still have some items left over from that, as well as the other set of items, which is the development impact fees, which will come due later this year. Eric and team, as well as former interim city manager Marty Lamelli, have almost completed or very close to completing a waterfront lease management policy review. And we intend to bring that forward in the end of February to City Council for first review of that. Really extensive effort there. Review of CalPERS and other liabilities. There was a review done by Council, and then a small subset of follow-up items which we'll bring forward at the end of February. Completing the general plan LCP and zoning code update. We've had a really good thorough review by coastal staff, and then we're starting to move into consideration of the environmental review of that, which we anticipate being concluded by mid-year, as well as the first parts of the general plan LCP coming to Planning Commission and Council mid-year this year. Wolfe implementation we've talked about tonight. Local labor consideration for Wolfe. Council did approve that being consideration of the bid documents, which we'll bring to Council before putting that out in the street. SLO County regional effort on affordable housing. A lot of work being done at the staff level, but we are going to be bringing components of that to City Council very soon. And the county may also be considering a tax measure for affordable housing funding in the November ballot. Short-term vacation rental policy revision. Based on council direction, we've moved that forward in terms of priority and placement on the work plan. The vacation rental committee is well underway. I think we've hosted maybe 5 or 6 meetings thus far, with probably three-ish more to go, maybe one more, with the goal to bring it to Planning Commission, spring at the latest, for their consideration and council adoption. Of course, it has to go to the Coastal Commission for ultimate authority and approval, but we can get our work done. And thanks to Mayor Heading and Councilmember McPherson participating in that committee. Implementing One Water CIP projects. Rob answered a question from the community member about the RFPs going out for those. So the first set of projects that were approved, work has been conducted on those. There is a lot of other items that are sort of out there that we're working on that are kind of outlined in the staff report, so I won't go into those, but just wanted to give you an update on that. And then as far as the next process, we typically follow the election cycles to do a thorough review of the goals. So in 2021, in January, after the new council is seated, we would pick up where we left off last year, which is to do a thorough outreach, do a thorough review of the existing goals and action items, and see where we go from there for another 2-year adoption. So I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have about the items I discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. When you see it all in one place, you recognize the magnitude of work that has been done by staff and council over the last year or so, and it's amazing to see the progress, and very much appreciate that. With that, I'll open it up for any council questions that you might have for Mr. Collins. See none to my left. Yes, Councilmember McPherson, sorry.
Thank you. Excuse me, I just have one question. I know that, and this is under your action items requiring more time, it's specifically the permit process review and improvements. And I know that you have done no work on this to date, and that I think in the text you suggested that that might not happen until mid-year of next year. I'm just wondering if you would be willing to consider a process very similar to the short-term vacation rental process, which has worked so very well and which puts a lot of the work on community members to reach a consensus on it, and especially here where we have some expertise that we could bring to bear, and if an ad hoc committee would be useful, and if that could speed up the process.
Absolutely. Thank you for recommending that. I've spoken with a couple of city managers who've undergone similar, well, a planning director for a major city and then a local city manager who've undergone these process reviews, if you will, and I've sort of kicked around different ideas, and that was, it was sort of in my mind because of the work that's going on with vacation rental policies, and they thought that was a great idea to sort of as a starting place. You know, I would assume I would be that in that position. So it's, I think, just thinking about timing and other things is really what I'm looking at. Is I don't know if I could participate in one ad hoc committee and be running another one at the same time. So it's really just about timing. But I absolutely think that would be a good approach. There are plenty of just regular community members as well as those who are deeply involved in development and those who've been past planning staff that are in the community. We could pull together a good team. Yeah.
What item number was that? I was just trying to find it.
It's on action items requiring more time.
It's in the staff report, not the PowerPoint. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's in the PowerPoint.
It's on.
But it's also in the.
It's on page.
But I think you said next year. Did you mean this year?
That means 2020.
2020.
Yes.
Not 2021.
No. I appreciate that.
Okay, that's the
But it said
clarification I
it's
wanted to-
suggested later in the
Yes.
year.
Right.
There was no time certain.
Correct.
And I was just trying to get a sense of if we could speed it up, given how critical I think that is, because we have so many major development projects that are coming before us, and we really do need to have a streamlined process. And so the sooner we can figure out how to do that, the better off we're going to be.
Right.
And that's why I just wanted to make sure that we could somehow speed that process up without taking up a lot of staff time by using another approach, which seems to be working with the vacation.
That's excellent. Yeah, and